Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel, where of course we're giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Today we're bringing you a little bit of a finance special, the first sort of one that we'll do of this on the Baggies Podcast from time to time. But today we're going to be discussing the loan taken out by Albion from MSD Holdings. We'll be joined by football finance expert Kieran Maguire, who's going to hopefully shed a bit of light on what seems like a very confusing time financially for Albion fans. And he's hopefully going to shed some light, explore this sort of loan, and of course give us some details on the implications for that loan being repaid on the 31st of December. So a bit of a finance special for you here on the Baggies Podcast. Hopefully you enjoy. Make sure you subscribe if you do. Comment your thoughts on the loan down below. Obviously, very concerning time for Albion fans. Hopefully Kieran will be here to shed a little bit more light on this. Make sure you subscribe, and let's head over to my little chat with Kieran about West Brom's loans and finances. So, as mentioned in the introduction, I am joined by football finance expert and host of the Price of Football podcast, Kieran Maguire. Kieran, first of all, how are you doing? Welcome to the show. It's really is great to have you here.
Well, thanks very much for the invite. Football finance never stops. It's 365 days a year. So keeping busy. We've got some clubs giving out their results. We've got West Brom who are appearing on my podcast too often. You know, if you appear once every 3 or 4 months, that's fine. If you're appearing once a week, which I have been recently with all the developments, that doesn't tend to be a good sign, unfortunately.
No, and it's not quite positive news as well. It's not like, oh, West Brom have made all of this money and look at them. It's more about what sort of things have been going on behind the scenes. But Kieran, of course, what you're here to talk about is, of course, the loan that was announced just yesterday evening. How best can you kind of explain this to Albion fans as to what exactly it is?
Well, reading the club's press release, they say that they've borrowed £20 million from MSD Holdings. And for people who aren't familiar with MSD, it's Michael Dell, the computer billionaire. He's got a private bank, in effect, which lends money and specialises in the entertainment and sports industry. So he's lent money to Burnley, to Derby, to Southampton, and a few other clubs as well in recent years. So that's the first issue, that they are a legitimate lender. They tend to borrow money themselves and then they lend it to football clubs, and they make money by, say, borrowing at 8% and lending it at 10%. So they make money on the difference. They've lent £20 million. It's a 4-year loan. I'm presuming that there'll be no repayments of capital during the 4 years. And at the end of 2026, the club has to find £20 million plus the interest to repay. Now, if West Bromwich Albion are in the Premier League, I don't see that as being a huge issue. If West Bromwich Albion are not in the Premier League, we've got an issue. That money, according to the club, is going to be used to pay the ongoing costs. In terms of the wage bill, the wage bill was £77 million in 2021. When the club was in the Premier League, it will have come down in 22 and 23, but it looks as if it's got to cover the wages, the overheads, and also money which is owed in respect of transfer fees. And again, looking at the numbers here, West Bromwich Albion at the end of 2021, and those are the latest figures that we've got, West Bromwich Albion at the time had outstanding instalments due on transfer fees of 27 million. So there's a few bits of sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul activities here, that it looks as if the club is going to have to go and pay off some of those instalments, doesn't have the cash to do so, and therefore has gone to MSD as a means of finding the money.
Okay, right. So it looks like perhaps those transfer fees for obviously Karlan Grant, who was an instalment transfer to Huddersfield Town. I think Grady Dean Garner, there's also an element of that in that transfer fee as well. So that's interesting to hear. But of course, no interest was disclosed in the statement, Kieran. Is that unusual, or is that something that for fans to perhaps be a little bit concerned about?
No, if we take a look at the loans that MSD have given to other clubs, we don't know the rate at Derby. We don't know the rate at Burnley. Southampton did disclose it, and for Southampton, it was 9.14%. Now Southampton borrowed that money, I think in 2021, so it was about 18 months ago. And what we've seen since then, of course, is interest rates in general have increased. Southampton had the benefits of being a Premier League football club, and therefore they were in a stronger position because they've got Premier League revenues. West Brom don't have any parachute payments following this season, so if you were assessing the risk of the club compared to Southampton, you would say it's a riskier loan. Riskier loans tend to be associated with higher rates of interest. So I'd expect it to be at least 10%. I think the club could help themselves here by being a bit more transparent. They must be aware that they're under scrutiny at present, and the more transparent you are, the more credibility I think you have with fans and other people who are concerned about the welfare of the club.
Yeah, and I think as well with transparency towards those sort of minority shareholders at the club, does that seem a little bit amiss towards them that this loan has kind of been taken out?
Yes, again, reading the press release, and I'd had contact with some of the West Brom shareholders already. Some of them had received a letter from the club, some of them hadn't. This was very much a rubber stamping of the loan because Gauchon Lai, apologies if I pronounced his name wrong there, but he owns over 80% of the shares. So therefore, if he was in favour of the loan, then it was going to go through. So I think the least the club could have done, given that he's likely to know the terms, is to be equally fair with all shareholders and say, this is the amounts that are going to be involved. Now, a £20 million loan over 4 years at 10% interest, we're talking a further £8 million there. Again, if West Brom return to the Premier League, not a huge issue. If West Brom are a championship club, not in receipt of parachute payments, that's a lot of money leaking out of the club each year. I mean, if you sort of benchmark West Brom against, I would guess, a club such as Bristol City or Birmingham or clubs like that who have been in the Championship for a few years, they are making normally between 20 to 25 million pounds a year in total income. If a tenth of that is going in interest payments, that's money that's coming out of your wage bill, it's coming out of your overheads bill, it's coming out of the transfer pot as well.
Wow, that really is shocking stuff. But and of course, with that loan being sort of secured against all of the group assets, what does that mean, and how might that impact things? Should this loan maybe not be repaid in 4 years' time over that course?
Well, effectively, it's a mortgage. MSD Holdings are not going to give money to a football club unless they've got a degree of confidence. Now, often they will lend money on the basis of a club's future Premier League TV money or parachute payments. Well, West Bromwich Albion don't have those to offer. So the fact that they're over all of the group's assets, that means that it's going to include the stadium, it's going to include the training facilities in all probability. And provided the loan is repaid, it's not an issue. If they fail to make the appropriate payments on the appropriate days, then that would effectively allow MSD to get involved in terms of a forced sale of the stadium or other property assets. We can't say with certainty comments like that, but that tends to be a fairly standard issue. I would expect the club to put up a few more details of the loan agreement if it is secured, if it is a mortgage deed on Companies House, and then perhaps we can start to look at the small print. But that's not what we want to be doing as West Brom fans. We want to be watching the match, having an enjoyable experience, and not fretting about things like this.
And with also, Kieran, just sort of touching on that sort of element of the loan, it's for the sort of general runnings of the club and the general costs. Is that a real concern as well? Because it seems like that the general runnings of the costs of the club should be sort of covered for with income and things like that. But of course, with that being paid for by the looks of this with this loan, it does seem like there's not really very much money around, and that loan is kind of necessary, and that comes as a real concern to a lot of fans.
Yes, I can understand fans' concern there, because West Brom should be receiving somewhere in the region of £34 million of parachute payments this season. So that's going to be the biggest contributor to the overall income streams of the club. Gauchon Lai is due to repay his loan of, was it 4.95 million in a couple of days. So that should be further improvement in cash flow. Normally, if you're taking out a mortgage, it's in order to buy something big.
Yes.
And sorry. So if you're buying a house, you take out a mortgage, but you've got a big asset. If I was taking out a mortgage to cover the fact that my wages aren't paying the electricity bill, I've got a problem. So that is a cause for concern, and also the fact that it's £20 million. If West Bromwich Albion need a further £20 million on top of the parachute payments, on top of the money repaid by Gauchon Lai for their day-to-day running costs, that does suggest that they've got poor cost control, unless they're under a lot of pressure. We mentioned the instalments which are due in respect of these transfers. I suspect most of those will have either had to be paid at the start of this year's transfer window, or will be due in January. For quite often you're paying in 6-month instalments.
Yes. Absolutely, and with obviously you touched on there the loan that's set to be repaid on the 31st of December. What sort of implications? Obviously, Albion fans are, I think, a little sceptical as to whether the loan will be paid back. What sort of implications would there be able to happen should that loan maybe not be paid back on the 31st?
Well, if there is an agreement between the two parties and Gauchon Lai's company is in breach of that contract, then West Bromwich Albion could sue. Now, whether West Bromwich Albion, owned by Gauchon Lai, are going to sue another company owned by Gauchon Lai, I think you can probably imagine. I'm a little bit sceptical here myself. So we have to await developments. I think there is pressure on the club here to come up with an answer one way or the other. But if they say nothing, I think that's the worst thing that could happen, because the cynics will say, well, we therefore draw the conclusion that the loan's not been repaid. I think Ron Gourlay's now got to step up and to improve the communications. Clearly, there's a toxic relationship between the owner and the owner and the fan base, and this is where a good chief executive will act as an intermediary and come and be clean with the fans and hopefully allay their fears.
Absolutely, I think transparency here, Kieran, is what we really need. But you've helped provide a little bit of that today on the Baggies podcast. So thank you so much, Kieran, for joining us. We really, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for the invite. It's always good to be talking about a club called Albion playing in blue and white stripes as a Brighton fan. So I wish you all the best for the rest of the season.
Thanks so much, Kieran.
Once again, a huge thanks to Kieran for joining us on the Baggies Podcast YouTube channel today. We really appreciate his time. Make sure you go and check out his podcast, The Price of Football. And of course, he's got a book as well. And also make sure to go and follow him on Twitter. There'll be some links in the description. So thanks so much for Kieran for joining us. We really appreciate it. Hopefully he's helped clarify a few things for myself and of course you Albion fans as well, but we really appreciate his time. But that brings us to the end of this Baggies podcast, finance and loan special we'll call it. Make sure you subscribe if you're new, comment your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.